Hi and welcome to this episode of Fresh Vitality with Monica, the health coach to help you feel comfortable in your skin, inside and out. So in the last video we were talking about sensible sun exposure and how that helps with vitamin D absorption and creation. And the general advice is to spend 15-20 minutes, some people say half an hour a day, in the sunshine without sunscreen to make sure you get an adequate amount of vitamin D. But I kind of thought after that video, actually, this is not quite specific enough for me. I want to learn a little bit more about how much we actually need. What about people who live in different latitudes, different skin colours, etc., etc. So I've got a great resource for you right at the end of the video, so make sure you watch it all the way through. And as I went and researched it a little bit more, I'm going to mainly be quoting from a review article in the New England Journal of Medicine from Dr. Michael F. Hollick. And Dr. Hollick says that, like I mentioned rickets in my last video, that rickets can be considered the tip of the vitamin D deficiency iceberg. I just quote from him here. In fact, vitamin D deficiency remains common in children and adults. In utero and during childhood, vitamin D deficiency can cause growth retardation and skeletal deformation and may increase the risk of hip fracture later in life. Vitamin D deficiency in adults can precipitate or exacerbate osteopenia and osteoporosis, cause osteomalacia and muscle weakness, and increase the risk of fracture. And a little bit later he says, of great interest is the role it can play in decreasing the risk of many chronic illnesses, including common cancers, autoimmune diseases, infectious diseases and cardiovascular diseases. Because it seems that most tissues and cells in the body have a vitamin D receptor, and so we need it for so much more than just to get the calcium into the bones. And another thing that I thought was quite interesting, that one study showed that 93% of persons 10 to 65 years of age who were admitted to a hospital emergency department with muscle aches and bone pain, and who had a wide variety of diagnoses, including fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome and depression, were deficient in vitamin D. Another thing I heard recently is that stress actually blocks the absorption of vitamin D. So again, we need to think about this whole topic in a much more holistic way. Although there is no consensus between experts about the optimal levels of what they call 25-hydroxyvitamin D as measured in serum, most experts seem to agree that vitamin D deficiency is defined if you have a 25-hydroxyvitamin D level of less than 20 nanograms per milliliter. Dr. Hollick, in his research, he seems to believe that a level of 30 nanograms per milliliter or greater can be considered to indicate sufficient vitamin D. So that's a little bit higher. But like I said, it's there is no widespread consensus. Now the sources for and metabolism of vitamin D. The sources, of course, are exposure to sunlight, like we talked about in the last video. Also diet, mainly oily fish and some dairy products and eggs, and of course dietary supplements. And when you think about dietary supplements, you want to make sure that it's vitamin D3, not vitamin D2 that you're getting. Another important thing to remember is that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So it does need fat to be converted into vitamin D, and then also for further processes in the body. So basically, ditch the low-fat diets, people. It's not good. But however, on the other end of the spectrum is that in obesity there seems to be less bioavailability of vitamin D. So again, we want to look at things in balance here. The really brilliant thing is about the exposure to sunlight and the way of getting vitamin D from that source is that there can't be any toxicity, because as we know, fat-soluble vitamins, we need to be careful as they're stored in the body. They don't just pass through, that we don't get to a toxic level, and because any excess vitamin D3 or vitamin D3 is destroyed by sunlight, excessive exposure to sunlight does not cause vitamin D3 intoxication. And because the vitamin D can be stored in our fat cells, it also means that it'll be stored, if we get enough sun exposure in the summer, it'll be stored for release for the winter, which is brilliant. And of course, like I always say, I'm not talking about getting burned in the sun or anything, just sensible exposure. So in terms of supplementation, it looks like that most experts agree that without adequate sun exposure, children and adults require approximately 800 to 1,000 international units per day. So what about that toxicity level? Dr. Hollick says that vitamin D intoxication is extremely rare. However, if we had more than 150 nanograms per milliliter in our blood serum, that would be considered to be a toxic level, and that can cause a lot of problems. You'd have to have about 50,000 international units per day to get to that level, and when I did studies for doses of 10,000 international units of vitamin D per day for up to 5 months, that did not cause toxicity. However, I would not advise going quite that high. Like I said, there seems to be a general consensus that between 800 and 1,000 international units a day should give you enough. In conclusion, Dr. Hollick says that much evidence suggests that the recommended adequate intakes are actually inadequate and need to be increased to at least 800 international units of vitamin D3 per day. Unless a person eats oily fish very frequently, it is very difficult to obtain that much vitamin D3 on a daily basis from dietary sources. And of course, as we know, excessive exposure to sunlight, especially sunlight that causes sunburn, will increase the risk of skin cancer, so we don't quite want to go that far. Thus, sensible sun exposure or ultraviolet B irradiation and the use of supplements are needed to fulfill the body's vitamin D requirement. Now, I just want to mention one more thing, that when he talks about ultraviolet B irradiation from sunbeds, from tanning beds, I was first a little bit shocked to read that was even a consideration, as I always kind of think of these as terribly unhealthy. And they are basically, if you would want to go down that route rather than supplements, the maximum amount you should be in a sunbed is just less than half the time it would need to get even the slightest tan. So there we go, just wanted to clear that one up. So finally, going back to sun exposure, how much is enough, how much do we need from, depending on our skin type and where we are geographically. I found a resource on the internet, and I'm going to put the link down below here, where you can put in where you are, your skin type, your skin color rather, and even ozone levels, which I wasn't too sure about, and about the type of weather, sunny, cloudy, overcast, etc. So I played around with it a little bit, and for example, now in June, for someone like me, to get enough vitamin D on a sunny day just takes about 6 minutes every other day. So it's not a huge amount. On an overcast day, it would take just over half an hour every other day. However, in December, for example, like I said, I did play around with it a little bit. I would have to spend 24 hours in the sun every other day, which isn't even possible. And on a sunny day in December, it would be still 5.5 hours to get anywhere near enough every other day. So yeah, so it's quite fun to play around with this a little bit. I hope you find this useful. I hope you found the information useful. If you did, please like and share, and I look forward to speaking with you again very, very soon. Take care everyone, bye.